Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Welcome to another session of filming. And I've just woken up, and I'm here to drink some coffee and talk about some Overwatch and World Cup. So I wanted to sit and chat with you guys about how I'm looking at World Cup, how I'm structuring out these teams, because this should be pretty interesting. We haven't seen enough of a meta change just yet when it comes to Europe versus NA. And what do I mean by that? Okay. NA for me tends to be a little bit more leaning towards the Sombra Doomfist kind of compositions, whereas Europe is still very much relying on goats, relying on tank compositions to do a lot of the heavy lifting. They're confident in their Sombra play, but for the most part, I think they are, again, leaning towards more goats, and North America is leaning towards more anti-goats. So I think those two styles are going to clash early in the quarterfinals, at a head when it comes to the old Civil War. When it comes to the United States and the United Kingdom, first match of the quarterfinals, if I'm reading this correctly, which it looks like it. This is the first match. US versus UK. And, you know, I don't like to be one to peddle the rumor mill, but I have heard good things about the United States. The UK are subbing Infusions to replace Christopher as main tank. Will that cause issues? I don't think so. But I was never... I wasn't really that impressed with the UK. They were kind of the most NA of the EU teams, if that makes sense. They were accepting of the Sombra Doomfist. They were looking to use more anti-goats more than goats itself. Or at least towards the end of that France match, they kind of were at a loss when it came to goats, so they were trying to do new things. And I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. Will they go back to relying on goats? Will the United States just abuse them in that sense with their anti-goats composition? It's difficult to say, but I am leaning more towards the US. When it just, I mean, if we're looking at it just roster into roster, I think the US has more experience in that regard. Looking at how many Overwatch League players are within this team, they have had time to be able to gel, practicing beforehand, and the UK has actually changed up their rosters. So has practice been as diligent as the US's? It's hard to say, but I am leaning, no bias here, towards the US. I'm gonna say it's probably... I'll say it's probably something closer to a 3-1. I really don't. I was never that fond of the UK's lack of just top tier talent. In the sense that they don't have as much density as Overwatch League talent as the US does, and I think that can be abused. We'll have to see. I would like for this to be the litmus test, though. I would love to see the UK come out with goats. They think goats is the strongest composition, and I would love to see the US come out and say, no, I don't think goats is the strongest composition. I think this is the strongest composition, like an anti-goats comp. And then have those two styles clash and see who comes out as the victor. Now, I don't think my prediction has too much weight when it comes to answering that question of which style is better or worse. That still is out on the table. But I do think the US is probably the leading team in that anti-goats style. So if they falter here, then I don't know what else is stopping goats from just... or death ball tank compositions from running amok and eating this whole group stage alive, or playoffs, I should say. It's not group stage anymore. So I'm going with The U.S. 3-1 over the U.K. First match of what I believe that is that Friday, I believe. And then we've got South Korea versus Australia. Again, while South Korea has been hedging their bets and saying, oh, well, we haven't been practicing very well, and they just had to change up their lineup to arguably a very, very strong lineup. So we've got Fleta back in. Anybody who knows me knows that that's just the right choice. Objectively, I should say, not subjectively. I think adding Fleta here was an amazing move. Adds a lot to their flexibility. And then having Fury and Animo. Fury probably one of the best flex tanks, if not the best flex tank. And then Animo, I think a lot of people sleep on him. But I think he's a very, very solid, very good main support. They're playing against Australia. And while Australia definitely surprises me last year at the World Cup, I don't see them beating South Korea, even if the rumors are true and, maybe they aren't hedging their bets. Maybe they do not have good practice. Maybe things are just not looking good in South Korea's camp. But I do not think Australia just has the firepower to overtake some of these names: Fleta, Libero, Carpe, Fury, Fate, Jonek, Animo, Coach Pavane. That is easily, for me, on paper at least, theoretically, a playoff caliber Overwatch League team. I don't see how Australia comes into this. If I was Australia, I would really be, crossing my fingers and my toes that this is the weakest South Korea is going to look at a World Cup, because they're going to need some extra help here. And I think this is probably going to be 3-1, maybe, let's say. Maybe the rumors are true. Again, I don't see South Korea dropping more than one map. Potentially leading into the semifinal, I think that could be a little bit more dangerous for them, but I don't see them struggling too hard against Australia personally. And that's no slight against Australia. I just think that South Korea just has some bulldozers, and I think they're just going to brute force their way through this quarterfinal. So I'll say 3-1 US, 3-1 UK, or 3-1 US UK. I'll say 3-1 South Korea, Australia. And we've got the most biased person here to look at China, Finland. 4-0 China, duh. Next. France, Canada. Again, this one echoes the same sense that the US, UK has issues with, or kind of is echoing the same themes there. Whereas France, again, you look at who they've signed, they've added a lot of the old Eagles roster. Some of the new Paris lineup is on this team. They're very strong at GOATs. They used GOATs to kind of take the World Cup group stage away from the UK. And from the rumors around them, they weren't supposed to be looking that great in scrims. They were, they weren't really performing very well at all. And I think that has a lot to do with their coaching staff using scrims properly as practice rather than just an exhibition to kind of test how good you are. Not to kind of always drudge up other esports, but it's interesting to me that I think Overwatch is having the same conundrum that League of Legends has, or Western League of Legends has, against Korean League of Legends, or even Chinese League of Legends, where they are caught in a paradox of having to perform very, very well in scrims to kind of get those high-level scrims, but because you're performing at the top and not really testing things to be able to secure those scrims and be very, very strong scrim partners, you're giving away information. You're giving away exactly how you play in tournament, in competition. And while you might take scrims off of really, really strong South Korean or Chinese teams, they now know exactly how to beat you. They have tape that is very, very close to your actual competition. So is that what France is utilizing? Are they the South Korean team here? Are they taking all of your information away from you? And maybe they're dropping scrims, but keeping morale high enough to be able to look at that practice tape, look at that film, and say, these are the patterns, these are the themes that we're seeing here, these are the compositions they want to run, these are the maps they like, and they can draft counter strategies around that. Is that what France is doing? I would tend to have to agree, at least with what the rumors were going into the group stage. And again, this is EU versus NA. It's goats versus or tank death ball strategies versus something that's a little bit different. Canada, at least in their group stage against the US, they were looking to do some crazy stuff. They were looking to innovate. I think both teams were very innovative and were looking to be a little bit creative. Maybe they were hiding things for playoffs. Who knows? But I think that question is going to be answered before we get into semifinals. What is the prevailing composition? Is it more of a stylistic thing? Can you win with both of them? And here I am going to say France. I think at the top of the bracket, you're going to get a North American team that's very, very strong at anti-tank. And then at the very bottom of the bracket, you're going to get a European team that is very strong at tanks in general. Now, this one I'm going to say is a little bit closer than most. I'll take this 3-2 France's way. I think Canada has a lot to prove. Again, they have very, very solid. They have a very solid lineup. Sure, for agilities, Mangachu, Note, XQC, Banny Crimzo, and Jane as the coach. I think they're going to do some wonky stuff. They might throw France a curveball that they weren't expecting, and that's how I see them kind of squeaking at wins. But when it comes to who is the better team at the end of the day, I do think France is going to be advancing. So for semifinals, that leaves us with the United States versus South Korea, China versus France, and the second match. Why was my intonation like that? I have no idea, but we're gonna leave it in because we're 11 minutes into the video and I can't be bothered to edit, so you're gonna just have to deal with that awkward transition. So the U.S. versus South Korea. This, I think, is interesting. It's difficult to call because in this hypothetical, we don't know exactly what South Korea looks like because they're changing up the roster quite drastically, and I haven't gotten to see the quarterfinals yet, so this could very easily change. But if I'm going to take this as a betting man, I do think South Korea probably edges us out. I do think just historically looking at the data, I have to lean 60-40 to South Korea. Could that be all thrown out the window? Yes. I do think if there is going to be an upset here, this is where it happens. The US versus South Korea, an upset could happen here. 100%. This is my dark horse match. You have to watch this. And it could happen. But if I'm a betting man, I do have to place my bet on South Korea here. I think, again, this is going to be extremely close. If the rumors are true and South Korea is not looking good and their practice has been poor and the new players that they've added are changing, it's changing up a lot of the structures preset in place in the group stages, things could happen here, 100%. But if I'm a betting man, I bet on South Korea. It's throughout history, they've always been very, very dominant team. They've won the last two seasons, last two World Cups. I have to hedge my bets there and say South Korea. As much as I would love to see the U.S. kind of, make a roaring comeback, at home in L.A. at BlizzCon, that would be amazing. But again, gonna have to say probably 3-2 South Korea. In a very, very close 3-2. South Korea here probably looks beatable, but I'm gonna say 3-2 South Korea. But dark horse match, definitely pay attention to it because an upset could happen. Again, I think it's like 60-40 US. There's a very good chance the US comes back, they squeak out that game 5 and they win. It's very possible. But again, South Korea is South Korea. And we've got China, France. Now this is interesting because where does China sit on that spectrum of NA versus EU and that kind of anti-tank versus tank meta? And I don't know that they even know. And I think that's really dangerous for France. Whereas France is very, very kind of out there. They're very, I wouldn't say predictable or one dimensional, but they lean towards goats, right? Look at their players, look at their history and contenders, what have you. They're strong at goats, right? They're very, very good tank team. But China has a lot of flexibility. I do really like this team. Oh man, France, China. I think this one, and I'm gonna go. I'm gonna be the one to say it. I think China has a chance here. I think they're crazy enough. I think they've got the flexibility to be able to pull that out. I think they're really going to lean a little bit more on Crystal here. Crystal is probably one of the best flex players, if not the best DPS player coming out of China at the moment. I would not be surprised to see him in the Overwatch League. I think that they were kind of hiding him a little bit, trying to leave a little bit more experience throughout the group stage, and he looked to be able to return to form very, very well. But this team is just so flexible. I think that they could pull out some really weird stuff and take a game off of France. And if the semifinals are going to be where upsets happen, I think China takes it here. I think it could be I think this one has a lot more volatility to it. So I'll say China 3-1 France. I like France. I like a lot of the members. But I do have to rep China a little bit more. That's my region. I cover it. And this isn't disingenuous. I just think that China has the makings of, characteristics that I like in teams. And whereas France is a little bit more narrow. They're a little bit more defined in the way that they play. China is open to doing anything and everything, and they have the pieces to be able to do that. So I'm going to put China forward. And the scoreline could change quite a bit. It could be a 3-1, could be 4-0. Who's to say? That one's a difficult one to call, but I'll say 3-1 China, which puts us in a Chinese South Korean final. Now, how biased do I want to be here? How absolutely disgusting do I want to be? Do I want to give it to China? Do I want to give it to South Korea? Okay, I'll hedge my. I guess I'll hedge my bet. If South Korea looks to flounder, they look like they have issues, and China is rising. They have a lot of momentum. Maybe even upsetting France, depending on how that narrative spun. This one, honestly, for me, if I'm conceptualizing it as well as I can, or as I'm doing it so far, you're kind of listening to the stream of consciousness come out as it's happening. This is the first time I've really sat down and taken a look at the group stage, or the playoff bracket, I should say. So if you're following my logic, right? I don't know how this final goes. This is a 50-50. You look at a South Korean team that looks beatable. They just came off of their match against the US, 3-2, very close fashion. They look beatable. If any time South Korea was going to lose, it would be in this metaphorical situation, right? China, coming off of an upset against France, looking very, very flexible. Crystal, Shy, Leave, Late Young, Guxia, Sky, and Yvetel. All Overwatch League caliber. Late Young, we'll see about you. Regardless of their ages, all Overwatch League caliber. I do think this is a lot closer than what people think it's going to be. And I think China could upset. It's a very, very, very high possibility if South Korea looks to be weak. And this is a straight 50-50 for me. It's so hard to call because of how strong the coaches for South Korea and some South Korean community members are coming out and saying, hey, things don't look good. Things are looking a little weird. they've had to change up their players, or they've at least made the choice to change up their players. I don't know what's going to happen with that team. So I think in this fantasy universe where it is South Korea in a Chinese final, that's a 50-50 for me. I legitimately don't know which way that goes. I'll say 51 South Korea. Again, if I'm going to hedge my bets in the semifinals for them, I'll say 51% South Korea. Probably a 3-2 match, regardless. As long as you follow my train of thought, as long as you follow the logic there. So to wrap up this preview that's been going on for 20 minutes, good Lord. So we've got the United States 3-1 over the UK. South Korea probably 3-1. Australia, if not 4-0. China blows out Finland. Come on now. It's China. What can I say? They're at least going to make it out of quarterfinals, right? And France, Canada, I think I said 3-1, 3-2, 3-2 France. Yeah, something like that. Go back and look. Semifinals, we've got the U.S., South Korea, 3-2 South Korea. And then we've got France, China, 3-2 China. And the finals are up for grabs. It's anybody's game. And we could see South Korea maybe be dethroned. I think if this was going to be the story, if there was ever going to be a storyline, it would be that. It would be, this is the year that South Korea looks the most vulnerable. Hopefully it is, because that would make for some awesome games. So hopefully you liked this long rambly video. If you did, let me know. Maybe I'll do some more kind of just weird one-off stream of consciousness style videos. And thanks for waking up and having coffee with me. So I'll see you guys later.